We started this edition of the SportsMax Zone with cricket as many West Indies fans woke up to shocking news that the Caribbean women lost their opening World Cup qualifying fixture to Scotland by 11 runs in Lahore. Early Wednesday morning Caribbean time, skipper Hayley Matthews had a brilliant all-round performance, first taking 4 for 56 after winning the toss and fielding, helping to dismiss the Scots for 244 in 45 overs, led by 55 from Sarah Bryce and 45 from Megan McCall. Matthews then returned to hit an unbeaten 114, sharing in a 113-run second wicket stand with Zayda James, who contributed 45, but it was not enough as the Windies women were routed for 233 in 46.2 overs. Coach Shane Dietz was disappointed, unsurprisingly, with the result.
Yeah, really pretty poor performance from most players. You know, won the toss on a wicket that was offering a lot in the morning, and the conditions were, not so hot this morning. It's going to be real hot in the afternoon. So we won the toss. It was a good toss to win. We started off pretty well with the ball, and then, Scotland come hard at us, and we didn't really respond well to the pressure put on us. So we're going to look at why that happened with the ball. We really didn't back ourselves enough. They wanted to win the game more and took it to us. And whether it's complacency or not backing ourselves or backing our skills, not sure. We'll obviously go have individual reviews tomorrow and work out the reasons why we did that, because it's not good enough and it can't happen again. But the beauty of this tournament is, we win the next 4 games, with a good net run rate, should see us through. So our goal now is the next game. Ireland are a good team, so that's going to be a great contest, and we're going to recover well and come up for a fight and come fight hard next game.
Well, one thing is for sure, based on what Shane Dietz says, it can't happen again. Nikhil Uttamchandani joins us now to have a recap of the encounter. Nikhil, we spoke at length yesterday, and one of the things I said in that conversation is that the West Indies, with maybe the exception of Thailand, have all very difficult matches that they cannot take for granted. And what we saw this morning, I suspect you would think as well, extremely disappointing. Just assess the overall performance from the Caribbean women and where you think they were let down.
Well, where do I start, Ricardo? Quite an eventful start to my day, as I know it was to yours. I kind of was up throughout the night, checking the scores, time streaming, and at 132 for 2, I definitely thought 102 runs needed with 8 wickets in hand. The West Indies would certainly get home from that position. 142 for 2, actually. So, yeah, I was shocked, to say the least. When I think back, though, if I think back to a few series, right, it clearly seems like for Shane Dietz's team to start tournaments, and listening to him speak there, it sounds almost like deja vu. I remember the India series. I came on the show after the first ODI, and he almost was like sending a statement to his team that they need to be better. And he almost said the word embarrassing. And I think that's what I kind of feel looking at the intensity that they played with, because I know they're better than that. And I think about the T20 World Cup where South Africa beat them by 10 wickets. The first first T20, against India, they came back and won the second one. And now again in this tournament, it seems like they don't get the intensity required to start tournaments like this. And unfortunately, this isn't a series. If you don't win games quickly, you could easily be eliminated after the next one, pretty much. So, yeah, a lot to unpack. It was very interesting, but let's see how they rebound.
I guess the difference is the difference in quality. South Africa, high-quality team. India, one of the very best teams in the world. Speaking about the T20 World Cup, when they lost their opening game to South Africa, and the series that followed against India, where they lost the opening game and rebounded quickly. So I think the disappointment for many fans would be that this is Ireland. That this is Scotland, Ireland coming up next, as opposed to one of the best teams in the world.
Yeah, and that's warranted. But I think that's what I love so much about cricket, and it's why I was drawn to the sport as opposed to other ones, because this game is such a funny game, and it takes 11 players on the field. And you look at that Scotland performance, it was an 11-player performance. When I look at the way they batted, and I know we're going to focus a lot on the West Indies in this conversation, but I don't want to take away the spotlight from a team like Scotland. Just made their first T20 World Cup a few months ago. To win against a team like the West Indies is a huge achievement. And I look at the way that they played their cricket, fundamentally sound. The running between the wickets, the minimization of dot balls, things that I feel like we've been asking for the West Indies to do a lot better. They seem to have a few of those bases covered. Very disciplined length bowling throughout the 50 overs. I thought they were really impressive on most fronts. But look, for the West Indies, I think it's a wake-up call. And it's probably better that it happened now than opposed to maybe the next game or game after, because they have to get serious quickly. I look back at a few things. Obviously, the batting is a big concern. The last 8 batters putting on 48 runs is simply not good enough. But I'm also looking at the bowling and some of the decision-making as well. I was really surprised that Chanel Henry only bowled 5 overs and Sharianne Fraser only bowled 2 overs. I mean, Henry, I think about her as someone who can contribute in all 3 phases of the game, right? I actually, after seeing this today, I actually went back and looked at some data. In the last 2 years, since the beginning of 2024, she's bowled 35 overs for the West Indies in ODI cricket. 29.5, so basically 30 of the overs have been in the first 10. My thing is that I understand that's her strength, and she's not been as effective outside the power play with the older ball. But how will she ever develop? How is she going to ever get the experience to be able to bowl across phases if she's never given the opportunity? There were times in that game, the 10 overs between 25 and 35, they scored 76 runs. And not once was she given the ball to come back into the attack to break that partnership. So there were a few things that puzzled me. I know that the West Indies would have had their plans, but Chanel Henry is a big project for me and is someone who I think should be bowling and doing more for West Indies cricket.
I guess the question is, Nikhil, is the World Cup qualifying tournament the place to have her, or to, I want to use the word experiment, with her bowling at the back end?
Well, we experimented with Zeta James batting at 3, and it clearly works. So I'm saying, why not experiment with this? And the thing is, Ricardo, I think she's experienced enough now, going to the WPL, being amongst great players for at least 5 years now, excelling at the CPL and being in a leadership position. I think she's ready. And it just takes probably a bit more time and impetus put on her and a bit more responsibility given. Even with bat, I think that we need to have that conversation as well. She hits the first 2 balls for 6 and then tries to hit another 6 and gets out. And I understand that's her style, but she needs to understand that given her importance and what she's achieved with bat in hand, now there's a greater onus placed on her wicket, and she's very important. The dismissals of her and Stefanie Taylor, for me, sort of lost the game for the West Indies.
Yeah, I hate to ask this question, Nikhil, but do you think the West Indies underestimated Scotland going into this game?
If I look at the intensity, lads, especially in the last 6 to 8 overs of the bowling effort, I would have to say yes. It looked complacent. The last 3 partnerships, I think, put on 32 runs. And again, this happens for all teams in world cricket, where you struggle sometimes to clean up the back end of that batting lineup, the opposition batting lineup. But just looking at the body language on the field, it didn't seem like there was urgency. And this is a problem that I think has been following the West Indies throughout formats and series. Being clinical at the back end of the innings and finding options who can bowl in the last 5 to 10 overs is critical. They had to rely on their spin yesterday because Alia Aline is sort of the only pacer that it has been developed into that role. And even she was quite expensive. So that is a big problem for me. And how they go forward, they've got to start developing some other options. I mean, I personally think Henry has enough in her skill set to be able to develop that attribute. She needs to be given time. But yes, to answer your question, I definitely think they underestimated them.
I saw coming out of the game where it was mentioned that Hayley Matthews is now the only player in history, men's and women's ODI cricket, to score 100 and take 4 wickets and be on a losing team. And I say that to say this, because I want you, first of all, to talk about Hayley Matthews and her brilliance, and also the age-old narrative that we've had with the West Indies women's team, that the responsibility is lying with too few players in this team.
Well, I want to say, Lance, and I know that, I mean, we could easily get into her innings and the way she batted, the way she controlled the chase. The one thing that I think about, right, and you always talk about the burden of captaincy, for Hayley Matthews to know that literally she holds the key to almost every single West Indian game with bat in hand, and still elevate her performance in the last 3 years as captain as well, I find that remarkable. And I think it could easily get overlooked, but within all sports or within all forms of cricket, men's and women's, I don't know if there's another player with more responsibility that has produced this much. So I think that in itself, and then to the fact that she's battled with cramp in 40-degree temperatures and has still been able to come back out and bat and then score runs and get the West Indies close, I think it speaks volumes of the player she is. And look, the West Indies are so fortunate. I was trying to think about a world without Hayley Matthews. What would the West Indies be? But look, I think it's a big issue. And I know I talked a lot about the younger players stepping up and trying to invest in the youth. But as we discussed yesterday, this is not the tournament to ask younger players to sort of step into that role to contribute. They've got to find a way. I look at the way Scotland batted with 6 batters facing over 20 balls. And people might say, well, you can face 20 balls and score no runs. Just for me, though, and that's why I was quite impressed with Zayda James, the way she occupied the crease, albeit she scored at a strike rate of 50, just the occupation at the crease, you could see how much Hayley Matthews, and it allowed her to flourish at the other end. It's a 50-over game. Let's get in the habit of trying to bat longer periods of time before we try to instill putting pressure on the opposition. Because you look at the shot selection and decision-making of the West Indies batters, you would think sometimes they're playing a T20 game.
The body language and, well, not only the body language, but the words expressed by Coach Shane Dietz at the end, obviously shattered. How did you read his comments and the narrative coming from him on what would have been a shocking afternoon for him?
To be honest, I was really impressed with how calm he looked. I was quite surprised, actually, even in that interview there.
Maybe he was still in a daze.
I don't know that, but I'm backing him because I think he's given us enough evidence. If I think about the India series, where I was really impressed with that T20I win against quality opposition, and then at the World Cup to make the semi-finals, I think I'm backing him to be able to get the best out of this team. From what I hear, the players have really bought into his philosophy and have a great relationship and rapport with him. Now, whether that wins cricket games on the field is yet to be determined, but I believe he can get the best out of these players. Someone else has got to step up with bat in hand. Zayda James was good with her 45, but the last 8 batters cannot be scoring 48 runs as a collective. I think if each person takes the responsibility to say, I'm going to bat 20 balls and try to aim to at least be 10 after 20 balls, once you're in, I think run scoring becomes a lot easier. Chanel Henry took the other approach. She tried to hit every ball for 6, which is fine. If it had come off and she hit 5 sixes and won the game, we'd be praising her, which is why this is sort of a tough job. But just the way the ability, I watched her at 9 for 3 in Vadodara against India in that game when she made 63. She's very capable of being able to occupy the crease against quality opposition in tough conditions. So look, someone else has got to take a bit more responsibility, and it has to happen fast because the West Indies cannot lose another game.
Yeah, Chanel Henry, 12 from 3 deliveries, 2 sixes, and then the next ball, she got out the run out of Stephanie Taylor as well. You mentioned it, touched on it earlier. That was a significant part of this contest because Stephanie has the quality to do exactly what you are suggesting, and that is occupy the crease and rotate the strike, which is all that was required in this situation for the West Indies women.
Yeah, and again, maybe it was an error in judgment from Hayley Matthews. Knowing the injury difficulties Taylor's had, you could see she was sort of gingerly making her way to the other end. But again, this is where I credit Scotland. The way that they sort of put pressure, even on Hayley Matthews in that phase, where they were getting a few wickets, but then making sure that the West Indies weren't able to take any pressure off, Scotland making sure they weren't taking any pressure off the West Indies with their field setting and the amount of dot balls they grouped together. Whereas when Scotland batted, every time a new batter came to the crease, you could see a low-risk approach, but quality rotation of strike. And look, Scotland faced less balls than the West Indies, and they faced 27 less dots. If we can make 10 more of those balls into just 1, the game could be a lot different and would have been a lot different. So, yeah, food for thought. But I think as much as we talk about the West Indies, let's give full credit to Scotland for a massive achievement.
Yeah, and what can you say about Hayley Matthews dragging herself from the stretcher to get back out in the middle and try and get the West Indies to victory, even as Scotland celebrated what they thought at that time was victory?
Put her in the SportsMax Hall of Fame, the West Indies Cricket Hall of Fame, the ICC Hall of Fame. She is brilliant, man, honestly. I'm so pleased that we have her not take the results out of it and the West Indies out of it, just to inspire the next generation of younger players in the Caribbean. I think she's pivotal to everything that happens in West Indies cricket. And I want us to enjoy each and every ball, each and every second of her on the field, because I think often we wait for players to be finished to value and honor them. But let's enjoy this, because she really is a modern day great. And I'm going to say it now, by the end of her career, if she keeps this up, she could easily go down as one of, if not the greatest of all time in the women's game.
Interesting. And what do you make of the changes for that second game against Ireland? Maybe in that opening slot?
No, I would actually change. You see, you leave my Canada Joseph alone, please, Ricardo. If Sherry-Ann Fraser is only in about 2 overs, I would rather have someone like a Glasgow or maybe a Rashida Williams to strengthen and deepen that batting. But yeah, again, each and every player has got to take some responsibility. Leave Kiana Joseph alone. She will come good.
I hope so. She does need to come good. Well, the entire West Indies batting lineup needs to come good for the remainder of this tournament. Coach Shane Dietz essentially said, listen, from this point on, we need to win and win convincingly, and that will get us through on net run rate at worst. So let's see what happens. Nikhil, as usual, thanks very much for stopping by, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks a lot, guys. Enjoy the rest of the show.
All right, thanks.
And up the Gunners. Sorry, I didn't say that. Up the Gunners, Legia. Up the Gunners.
Yeah, it's break time. You didn't hear that or see that.